Good afternoon, everyone, and officially welcome to our Kelley Outlook in Indianapolis. We're so glad to have you joining us this afternoon. We certainly missed gathering with you for breakfast in Indianapolis as we normally do, but due to these times, we're thrilled that you've been able to make some time to join us today for this annual Outlook tradition. On behalf of the Indiana Business Research Center and the Kelley School of Business Alumni Association, I do officially welcome you. My name is Jen Goins. I serve as Interim Executive Director of the Office of Development and Engagement, and it's my pleasure to officially welcome you today. Before we get to why you're here, I wanted just to share a few bit of housekeeping details. Again, you'll notice you'll remain on mute today. That is just to help us run most efficiently, and we thank you for your cooperation. However, this is not meant to be a muted participation. We want to hear from you. We want your questions. That is a real asset about this program. So I will be monitoring the chat function. If you have technical issues, if you have questions as we move throughout the panel, please post those as they come to you. We will have ample time at the end of this to get to your questions and to make sure that this is as much of a conversation as possible. So again, pose questions at any time. If you are having any sort of technical issues, post those there as well. And my colleague at Kelley and I that work behind the scenes will be sure to assist you. And we look forward to your questions. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Phil Powell, who will be serving as moderator today for our panel. Phil serves the Kelley School's Associate Dean of Academic Programs and is the Clinical Associate Professor of Business Economics and Public Policy. Previous to becoming Associate Dean, leading our Indianapolis campus, in July of 2016, Phil served as faculty chair for 4 of our major graduate programs: the Evening MBA program in Indianapolis, the full-time MBA program in Bloomington, and the Kelley Direct Online MBA and MS programs. He's also been instrumental in the launch of the Physicians MBA dual degree program with the IU School of Medicine. He's a wonderful advocate, a passionate leader, and as you'll quickly learn, just very informative when it comes to economy. Economist by trade, Phil, if I'm not mistaken. So we're thrilled to have him leading us today, and I will turn it over to you in the panel. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jen. It is, you're right. It is a shame that we can't be together, but the show goes on. And if there's ever a time to talk about economic forecasts, it's now. Dean Kestner sends her greetings. You know, if you were to summarize the mission of the Kelley School, it's to positively transform the knowledge, the people, the organizations, and the communities that we touch. And we focus in a major way on our Indianapolis region. From both of our campuses, we have 2 major objectives in helping our region. We want to graduate talent that meets labor needs and fuels regional prosperity. And we want to broaden business opportunity for businesses and residents in economically challenged communities in our region. Inclusive economic development is an important mission. And helping our community understand what to expect in the next year is part of fulfilling that mission. We have a great lineup today, both of an economic forecast, but also a discussion of how we're going to meet the challenges in our community. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panel in succession, and then we'll start. I'm going to introduce them in the way that they'll be speaking. After my introductions, you'll hear from Professor Kathy Bonser-Neal. Kathy has been at the Kelley School as long as I have. We came in as colleagues. Kathy has served as Evening MBA faculty chair in the past. She's one of our professors of finance. She has an accomplished research record in international economics and finance. She has her PhD from Chicago, probably the best economics department in the country. And Kathy will be giving us some insight on the national economy and on U.S. financial markets. Following Kathy will be another colleague of mine in business economics, Professor Kyle Anderson. Kyle got his PhD and his MBA from the Kelley School of Business. And also before that had an accomplished career in healthcare. As I mentioned, Kathy had been even MBA faculty chair Kyle is our current Evening MBA faculty chair and has led a very pivotal new curriculum change in the last couple of years and is encountering a lot of success. Kyle's going to talk to us about, give us more of a state and regional perspective on what 2021 holds for us economically. From Kyle and Kathy, we go to more of a more applied discussion of how the region, how we're dealing with the economic challenges in the region. When you talk about Indianapolis, we punch above our grade in terms of all sorts of economic development measures, but we're constantly challenged by the talent issue. Professor Charlotte Westerhaus-Renfrow, who's our new associate faculty chair of the undergraduate program at IUPUI, she has her JD from the Maurer School, has an accomplished executive career. She served as a vice president at the NCAA under Miles Brand. She was also interim president at Martin University. Charlotte is leading the Kelley School's charge on some new projects and new initiatives to bring our undergraduate curriculum closer to meeting the needs of our firms in the region. Not only in terms of talent, but also fulfilling the need, the very important need for a diverse and talented workforce. And Charlotte will talk about some of the new Kelley School strategic push in that area. We've got some great ideas coming out of our new career-focused curriculum in the undergraduate program at IUPUI. Lastly, we have Michael Huber. He's a friendly face. He's one of ours. He is, as you know, president and CEO of the Indy Chamber. Under his leadership since 2013, the Indy Chamber has really become a national leader in showing you how a Chamber of Commerce can lead regional development. When I first came into the dean's office in 2016, I immediately reconnected with Michael. Michael's an alum of the school. He got his MBA from the Kelley School. I had the pleasure of having him in class. It was great to reconnect with him. In fact, a lot of the initiatives from the Indy Chamber have inspired the new vision that we have coming out of our academic programs at IUPUI. Michael's going to talk about from his perspective, how the Chamber and other important partners in the region are going to be tackling the local economic challenges that we face in 2021. So, star panel here. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Kathy, to Professor Bonser-Neal, and let her talk about our economy and where we're headed at the national level. Kathy, take her away.
Thank you. Well, welcome everyone, and pleasure to be here, and hope you're all staying well. Well, this is an interesting time to be making an economic forecast for sure. And a year ago, when we were providing our economic outlook, of course, we had no idea what was ahead that year. We were forecasting growth a little bit above 2%. So, of course, after January 5th and the World Health Organization's discovery of or announcement of pneumonia of unknown causes, that started the whole pandemic, and with restrictions on mobility, on businesses, that began to unfold. So what I'd like to do before I present the forecast is just kind of catch you up on where we've been over this very volatile and unusual year. So where do we stand now at the end of 2020? So just kind of remind you of where we've come from. So after the restrictions began to unfold in March of 2020, GDP plunged in the second quarter by 31%. This is the largest quarterly decrease on record. Well, after quarter two, that dramatic plunge, and you can see that on the chart on the far left, GDP then rose by 33% in quarter three. So where does this leave us? Well, that 31% plunge drove us down to 2015 levels of GDP. The 33% increase has brought us back to about our level in 2018. But as you can see on that chart on the left, we are still far from where we were prior to COVID-19. In addition, of course, we've seen a dramatic and huge loss of jobs. So the economy to date, based on the most recent October jobs report that came out in October, has recovered about 12 million of the 22 million jobs that were lost in March and April. The unemployment rate has fallen from 14.7 to 16.9% as of the recent numbers released for October. We have interest rates that have fallen to historic lows, both short-term and long-term, and inflation remains below the Fed's target. Now, in all of this, of course, there's been differences in how the economy has reflected this. We know that the drop in GDP has been particularly hard on services, consumer services spending. Consumer services, by the way, comprise about 70% of total consumer spending. So when people were prevented and through self-actions from going out and engaging and participating in service activities such as restaurants and theaters and travel, that was a significant share of consumer spending that was just stopped. And that's why we're looking at this whole year, that part of that year as a result of the pandemic, as a sudden stop in economic activity. But we're seeing recovery. And again, both those charts on the bottom are indicating some of this recovery. In addition to the historic low interest rates, with long-term interest rates now below 1%, that's the Treasury 10-year bond rate, which has not been below 1% before. With inflation being low around the 2% level, we've also seen extraordinary Federal Reserve and fiscal support. So just to give you an indication, the Federal Reserve has purchased about $3 trillion worth of assets. The other extraordinary aspect of Federal Reserve support has been not only their purchase of their traditional assets during the global financial crisis. They were purchasing short-term, long-term bonds, mortgage-backed security assets, but they've widened that to a larger group of assets, including providing support for corporate bonds and municipal bonds and other kinds of asset-backed securities, as well as providing a Main Street lending program. So essentially a lending program that is helping small and medium-sized businesses. So that's brought the Federal Reserve's balance sheet up to about $7 trillion. So that's an extremely large increase. Of course, we know that the federal stimulus has also been about $3 trillion due to the CARES Act and other measures that have been taken. That has caused the budget deficit to rise to nearly 16% of GDP, and the overall federal debt as a share of GDP to rise to about 135%. Well, both those Federal Reserve and government actions were critical to supporting income and, importantly, also to supporting financial market stability. We did see signs of market stress in March. The entry of the Federal Reserve helped bring down those stress levels so that we did not see long-term disturbances in financial markets. Globally, we've seen the same hit, of course, around the world. The International Monetary Fund is estimating that the global economy will have shrunk by 4.4% in 2020. Now, there's some variation across that. Losses tend to be greater in Europe, UK, and Latin America. China is expected to have grown just under 2% in 2020 after, of course, having a much earlier hit at the end of 2019, first part of 2020. So that's where we are. And I put these charts in just so that you can see we have seen recovery, but we're not back to where we were prior to this pandemic. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. I wanted to also just talk a little bit about financial markets. I mentioned the very low interest rates that we're seeing. What about the stock market? Well, the stock market has also recorded record drops and also record highs. When we look at the stock market in terms of the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ composite. However, as we see in that lower chart, we've seen a very sharp drop in March, actually starting about February 19th. So the market was somewhat anticipating the drop in economic activity as news of these lockdowns and the spread of COVID accelerated. But then around March 23rd, the market started recovering, and that recovery continued so that the market started essentially reached new highs in as early as September of this year. What these lines are on the bottom, the top line is NASDAQ, the green. The red line is the S&P 500. That black line is the Russell 2000 index on the left, which indicates the about 2,000 of smaller companies that are publicly traded. So you can see that S&P 500 companies measured by the index, so the S&P 500 index has recovered and moved past its pre-COVID level, as has NASDAQ. However, the index representing smaller companies has not. And that's why I think it's important to understand when you're looking at the stock market that there's been very much a differential impact of COVID-19 and these lockdowns on sector stock performance. We saw gains in information technology and consumer discretionary and staples and health, with the largest gains being in information technology and consumer discretionary. And by the way, consumer discretionary actually includes Amazon. We saw extreme negative hits to energy, given the sharp fall in oil prices that we saw in the first half of the year. Also to finance and industrials. Industrials include airlines. So with curtailment, the stopping of travel, airlines were particularly hard hit. And so we've seen this differential impact. But the other thing that I think is important to realize about the S&P 500 and indices like this is they're not a reflection of the economy. So when we look at technology, media, telecom together, that comprises about 8% of GDP, but 35% of the market capitalization. If we just look at the top 5 stocks in the S&P 500, this dispersion is even more, it's heightened even more. So on the left is the market capitalization weighted, so that the chart on the right, but the bar on the left shows the market capitalization weighted increase of the top 5 companies. So that includes Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, Alphabet. So those companies are the top 5. And if we subtract those top 5 companies, we're actually in negative territory for the S&P 500. So the S&P 500 has really been driven by growth in a very small number of companies that comprise a large weight in the index. So this is relevant as we watch the market for an indication of what is this telling us about perhaps the economy. It's telling us that there are some firms that have been highly rewarded, but as the Russell 2000 index is also showing, there have been many companies in terms of market performance that have not recovered. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is based on this, to bring us up to date, where do we think the economy is going to be headed going forward? Well, we are expecting continued positive economic growth, a rise in real GDP that could even return us to the 2019 GDP levels that by about the middle to the end of next year. But that growth is going to decelerate as we go through the year. We can't maintain 33% growth. Forecast for fourth quarter are much lower, and we're assuming a more normal growth rate around 2 to 2.5% going forward. As part of that, we expect consumer spending recovery to continue, but still it will be stronger in the goods rather than in the services purchases. Again, services are the largest component of spending, so that means consumer spending won't necessarily be fully recovered as we go into 2021. Investment spending, we expect to be strongest in the residential sector. Housing is booming right now, but business construction is weak. and it's likely to remain weak going forward. Investment spending on equipment is expected to continue to recover, but a lot of that could be reflecting replacements. So very cautious on that. Business earnings continue to recover, and there is some evidence that companies are adjusting. They're starting to invest in new technology to adjust to this new normal of our business environment. We expect employment growth will continue, but at a slower pace. And we don't expect to reach pre-COVID levels of employment or the lower unemployment rate that we saw in the first part of 2020 reached until 2022 or 2023. So we're not going to see a full recovery in the labor market. More concerning is the risk that some job losses could be permanent. And that could lower economic growth going forward. We expect interest rates to remain around current levels. That's what the Fed has indicated. And we expect inflation to be very moderate, even though the Fed has adjusted its inflation target to allow for a bit more inflation. We expect global economies to recover, but at different speeds. Global economy to grow by about 5.2% is what the IMF is forecasting, but that will also differ across region, with growth in China expected to be high, growth in some European countries and Japan lower. But again, I'd like to emphasize that these are expectations, but they come with a large degree of uncertainty, depending on the spread of COVID-19, on personal and government responses to that, whether we need additional restrictions, whether consumers decide for themselves that they need to curtail their mobility activity and engagement outside of their home, and the availability of the vaccine. We had good news today from Pfizer on the vaccine, so that's very hopeful, but there still remains much uncertainty about when that will be available. And we'll also have policy uncertainty as we figure out what the ultimate result of the election could mean for any changes in policy going forward. So I'll look forward to any questions that you have going after this. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. Now I'm going to talk about the Indiana economy and a little bit about the Indianapolis economy as well. And basically, my role here is to kind of build off of Kathy's presentation and then talk about what differences there are for Indiana and Indianapolis a little bit. So one thing to always keep in mind about Indiana's economy is that we are kind of pro-cyclical. That is, and this graph may be a little bit hard to see on your screen, but the left bar is employment growth in Indiana, the percentage change in employment growth, and the right bar is for the US. And basically the point here is that when the economy is going well, Indiana often outpaces in employment growth. And when recessions hit or tough economic times hit, and basically what we did was took the observations there are annual data, except for the last year, which kind of split in the middle. So Indiana was hurt more during the shutdown period than the US as a whole. And a lot of that had to do with things like manufacturing, with goods production that were shut down. We can do some businesses work from home, but you can't really do manufacturing in a work from home environment. So Indiana was hit hard kind of March through May, but we're recovering a little more quickly, again, because of putting that back together. The unemployment rate in Indiana stands at 6.2%, but there's one thing to always keep in mind about the unemployment rate, and I put on here that 60,000 people are missing, and that basically represents the decline in the workforce this year up till now. So we have 60,000 people who have left the labor force, and we know from research that that's disproportionately women who are leaving the workforce. And so that suggests strongly that the biggest driver of that is family reasons. The fact that schools aren't fully open everywhere and other sorts of family obligations have caused people to leave the workforce. If you added those back in, the unemployment rate, if you counted them as unemployed, and we don't count them as unemployed right now because they're not looking for work and not working, but if you counted them, the unemployment rate would be closer to 9% in Indiana. So there's definitely some challenges there. And not all of these, we tend to think about everything being pandemic related, and it really is right now. But we have seen over the last couple years some significant trade policy difficulties that have put a damper on Indiana's growth a little bit. So that's just kind of the broad overview of the Indiana economy. Now let's take a look at Indianapolis. So, and when I talk about Indianapolis here, I'm largely talking about the Indianapolis, Carmel / Anderson, basically the Marion County and the region surrounding, going all the way up to Anderson and down to Greenwood and around. Indianapolis definitely swings above its weight in the Indiana economy. We produce about 34% of the output, generate 34% of the income with about 29% of the population. And in most metrics, such as unemployment rate and income, we tend to lead the state, although that has closed a little bit. So the unemployment rate in Indianapolis MSA is very similar to Indiana's right now, where usually it's significantly lower. Of course, there's a big area of the Indianapolis economy. I want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges facing downtown right now. And part of the reason Indianapolis has been hit a little bit harder is think about the dependence on things like travel and tourism, the convention business, the airport struggling right now. These are all industries that impact Indianapolis much more so than other areas of the state. One of the things that I'm really keeping an eye on is the impact of government spending and whether we're going to be faced with cutting back on government spending. And I'm talking, there's an impact of federal government, but I'm thinking about state government and local government spending, that if that's pulled back significantly due to tax shortages, then we're going to see a slower recovery than we otherwise would. Some cancellation of events. 2021 was set to be a great year for Indianapolis with some very large events. The NBA All-Star Game, the NCAA Men's Basketball Final Four, and these are likely to be either canceled or at least diminished from an economic driver sort of viewpoint. Downtown faces significant challenges, just work from home. And some of these changes may well be permanent even after we have a vaccine or get past this COVID-19 pandemic, however that looks like. And then social and political unrest has again hit more cities than other places. And part of that is reality, and part of that is a perception that Indianapolis or downtown areas in general are places that people may not want to be as much. But there are some real bright spots. Kathy talked a little bit about real estate. Residential real estate is doing extremely well in central Indiana. And a lot of our companies are doing quite well also. With that, I want to kind of move into the forecast for the area. So just like the national forecast, we will see output increases and jobs growth in 2021. And largely that will offset the damage of 2020. And one way to think about this is basically I think we're going to end up with a lost 2 years. When we're back together here next November of 2021, I think that time period will look very much like November of 2019 did. So we're going to have an economic output and an employment situation very close to that, but we'll have lost 2 years of growth. And that's a very significant loss due to this pandemic. I think we need economic stimulus. In the Indiana forecast in Indianapolis, we think a lot about, Northern Indiana still has a lot of dependence on big manufacturing, the auto industry, RVs, areas in the state that are really dependent upon that. and consumer incomes are going to be a part of that. So a stimulus package being passed that's of good size, either here in the fourth quarter remaining, or maybe more likely in the first quarter of 2021, would be extremely beneficial. Small businesses face all sorts of challenges, and we're seeing that everywhere, but downtown is certainly no exception. But all around central Indiana, a lot of small businesses are struggling. Specific industries, the restaurant, hospitality, hotels, some of those businesses are really hurting right now. Over the next year, I think unemployment is going to fall to between 4 and 5%, which is kind of a wide range in there, but that reflects a lot of the uncertainty that's going on. And all of this is just dependent upon the pandemic improving and us being able to, at the very least, sustain strong economic activity while we deal with the pandemic. And let's all hope that dealing with it means an effective vaccine and maybe being effectively able to move on from it in the relatively near future. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Charlotte to talk about some of our IUPUI initiatives.
Thank you, Kyle. I'm so excited, but really excite our employers. And that is, there will be a rebound. There will be a rebound. It may take a little bit, but we can't dry up the pipeline of talent. There'll be prior to COVID-19, there was a national need and regional need for talent. And as we rebound, we will have to keep that pipeline full of talent that will invigorate businesses here in central Indiana, and nationally. Now, Kelley's always been a leader in this, and especially here at IUPUI. We've had explorational learning is a major thing throughout our undergraduate curriculum. And we have a saying here, your next business idea may come from Kelley, even while our students are enrolled. Before I tell you about some of the new exciting things that will be happening this upcoming academic year, I want to just give you a quick overview, in case you're not familiar with our curriculum, of some of the things that have sustained business growth in the past here and will be invigorated in the future within our curriculum. Now, at Kelley, you start business school as a junior. And as a junior, your very first semester, you get into something we call the Integrated Core, or I-Core. And all of our students take a course in marketing, finance, operations, supply chain management. Really important skills in those courses for Central Indiana. And they also take team dynamics and leadership so they can actually get into the workplace and do well from day one. Now, they work on a project as juniors. It's a cross-functional semester-long project. And here's the added value. All of our Kelley grads have developed a business plan working with real businesses here in Central Indiana. And they have introduced new products and new services that have immediately had impact on the needs of various target markets. This is a long-standing program, and it probably supports the reason why that even in the midst of the onset of the pandemic this past spring, 97% of our graduates within 90 days had meaningful employment in the areas that they wanted. Now, we could just have stood still just on that record. But once again, we understood that to move forward, our employers and recent graduates were telling us to move forward, we have to actually invigorate this even more. Work plus learning is extremely important, but we want to reach more students so they can learn and work. So in conjunction with our integrated core that starts in our junior year, we'll have new exciting courses coming this upcoming fall semester that will help our students improve their marketability, increase their success once they graduate, actually give them meaningful internships while they're freshmen and sophomores. More and more, prior to COVID-19, if our employers said they were really looking for more interns, and that also will come back. So what we're going to do is add new courses for pre-business students, freshmen and sophomores. Well, they will be put with technology, up-to-date technology, and have the experience of managing simulated businesses freshman and sophomore year prior to going into our integrated core. This will not only enhance their marketability and their success, but also it'll make a positive impact, an economic impact on our community. Finally, in doing this, we are still going to keep our bedrock of keeping all of these offerings affordable. We're part of Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis, and our tuition, especially for our in-state students, will remain affordable. But here's the value. Upon graduation, the ability to go out and work well, and work successfully from freshman year to senior year and to graduation. And that's the real value. The real value for most of our students, and perhaps you, when you went to school, was you were trying to better yourself economically and better your community as well as your intellectual capability. And finally, we're extremely proud of the fact that we are very, very much into fostering and supporting the growing diversity and inclusivity in our region, which will surely help us fuel a pathway out of COVID-19 and to future success and boom for Central Indiana. And speaking of success and boom, there's no one else I know better than this on how Indianapolis can thrive again, would be Michael Hubert. Michael, take it away.
Thanks so much, Professor Westerhaus-Renfrow. And I want to thank you and Professor Bonser-Neal and Professor Anderson for that outlook. And this is the local focus in less than 5 minutes, because I know we want to get to the questions. And I appreciate the opportunity from the Kelley School and to listen to 3 diverse perspectives in terms of what we're looking at as we look into 2021. I'm going to do the good, the bad, or the challenging, and the opportunity before we move on to the Q&A. One really important point as we think about the Indianapolis region, and the Indy Chamber organization has over 2,000 business members in a 9-county region. So when we think about Indianapolis, we generally think 9 counties. It is true, and Professor Anderson's presentation reinforced this, there's a mix of industries in the Indianapolis region that make this in some ways some great opportunities, but definitely some challenges too. I would say in terms of those industries doing very well, e-commerce and logistics are doing very well. You heard that from our presenters before. Life sciences, Indy has got a cluster of companies, Lilly, Roche, and others, their suppliers, who have really ramped up production in the fight against COVID-19. We'll get to the hospitality sector in a second, which is very challenging. But there's a mix of industries here that could stand to do very well compared to other metros. It's a diversified economy that you don't see from some of our other competitor cities, even like Nashville, Tennessee, which is a hot market. There's a great mix here. There's also, we're looking at, could Indianapolis win in the next world where these really, really expensive, dense metros for young people, for IU Kelley graduates like New York, San Francisco, there's a question mark as to how fast people will come back. A lot of people, especially young people with kids, have left those cities for less expensive areas where they can, stretch out a little bit more, less dense areas. And there's a scenario in which in the long run, Indy could win when you look at people who are being displaced by very expensive metros. So we need to think about that. Certainly, we need to play up and become stronger in retaining and recruiting and attracting the diversity that Professor Westerhaus-Renfrow is talking about. But there's a scenario in which Indianapolis could win. The bad or the challenging is a lot of what Professor Anderson said. The losses in the hospitality sector right now are heartbreaking. They're heartbreaking if you just live anywhere in the region. They're heartbreaking for us as a business association. An hour before this call started, I got word that here in Fall Creek Place on the near north side of Indianapolis, one of our favorite restaurants is closing. Don't know if they'll come back. And so we're waiting with bated breath to see if Congress will pass another aid package, before we get a new presidential administration and some members of Congress. My hope is, I don't have that much hope for the next couple of months for that, but we're hoping that another round of aid package could do a lot of good to save a lot of these small businesses. And again, back to Professor Anderson's presentation about downtown. Downtown Indianapolis has a disproportionate share of the jobs in central Indiana, in a central Indiana that already provides a disproportionate amount of jobs for the entire state. Downtown Indianapolis just psychologically is really, really important. And the problem is the two biggest drivers of economic activity in our downtown, which is special events and people coming in for special events and sporting events, and the concentration of major employers, many of whom are still keeping their employees at home or having them work on flex schedules. We don't know what's going to happen until we know more about vaccine or advanced treatments. Another thing is all of our jobs got a little bit tougher with the election results on Tuesday, because I'll say that a lot of people are happy about the change in presidential administration. I'm not talking, that's not a partisan statement, but here's something that can't be disputed. The rural areas in America and in Indiana just got a little bit more red, and the urban areas just got a little bit more blue. That can be really challenging at a time when we need state and local governments to be very nimble and interpret information from the public health experts in terms of how businesses are going to respond. And so all of us as individuals, all of us as organizations need to be a force to build these bridges and get public officials who don't maybe think alike to act for the good of all of our communities. The opportunities, and this is what we tell all of our members, Dr. Phil Powell tells our members this: now is the time. If you still got a functioning business, call yourself lucky and form new business partnerships, experiment with new ways to deliver services, because we're not out of this. You're seeing a lot of creative ideas for hosting events. I'm not kidding myself that these new ways for hosting distanced events are going to be enough to get us out of the recession, but it's still, now is the time for creativity, for doing new things. The future of Indianapolis has got to bring more regional collaboration, because one thing that you're seeing with a lot of the fear related to downtown Indianapolis, and downtowns everywhere though, is a lot of people think that they can, go away to the suburbs, pull their business out to the suburbs and sort of get away from the problem. And the fact is we cannot. The ripple effects from downtown Indianapolis to the region to the state are just too powerful. And so I know we're going to be a force in making sure that everybody in the entire region feels some, whether you live in Carmel or Greenwood or wherever, you feel some ownership of downtown Indianapolis, because it impacts you no matter where you live in these 9 counties. There's also a genuine move by many of our employers, especially major employers, to get meaningful work done in the area of racial equity and to recruit more aggressively African Americans and people of color and promote them to management, to their boards. A genuine commitment of companies who are made commitments to hire more suppliers, businesses owned by Black entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of color. And it's not just 1 or 2, it is dozens of businesses who have signed on to the Lilly Pledge. If you haven't been tracking that, you can look that up a few weeks ago. So we can see a lot of great potential coming out of what's been a very challenging time, and is going to be for a while. But I can't emphasize this enough. Having conversations right now in our own circles of influence and business circles with people who don't think like us has never been more important. I heard a professor on NPR this morning to say, be relational, not confrontational. That, business has got a unique ability to bring people together around and try to form these concepts of an economic common good, and ultimately a common good. And it is so important right now that we do that as a community, even in our own business circles. So lots more to talk about. I sure appreciate being a part of this panel. With that, I believe we'll go to the Q&A.
Michael, thank you so much. As my colleagues, as everybody kind of comes back in and turns their cameras on, and we'll go to the Q&A, I just want to give you praise, Michael, for your leadership in the community. In March, you pulled in community leaders, including myself, and said, we're going to have a rapid response effort. And the Kelley School has been supporting Michael's and the Chamber's approach to making sure our small businesses are supported.
Well, let me say real quick, I'll get in. The Kelley School, it's documented, has helped hundreds of businesses with essentially technical expertise, advice from students and faculty. And we've just created a new program called the Enterprise Core, which I believe CORPS, which is the Kelley School providing that expertise to small business owners. And we're hoping to scale that program. We're so appreciative, Phil, to you and other faculty members who are giving generously of their time to vulnerable businesses to try to keep them thriving. And some of them, in some cases, just keep them alive during this incredibly challenging time. So thank you.
Absolutely, Michael. It's great to work with you. This is about something larger than ourselves. It's about helping our businesses grow and recover in an inclusive and equitable way. So anyway, we've got limited time. Jen, I want to thank all my panelists, my colleagues, but we're here to answer the questions that our audience has. So start bringing them on, Jen.
Thank you for all the submissions. The first one is specifically for Catherine or Kathy, but anyone can answer. Question is this: why is it that 5 large companies are making or keeping stocks high, but all others seem to struggle? What's the disconnect between the stock market and the local economies? And why have stocks rebounded when so many people are still out of jobs or businesses continue to close?
Well, in terms of the 5 stocks, these are technology stocks. And so to me, it's signaling 2 things. Well, one, you've seen a tremendous rise in the price of stocks like Apple and Microsoft and Amazon that are providing really technology-based services. And technology is important going forward. And companies that can be a part and innovate using technology, and including AI, are going to get ahead. So I think part of the increase is just reflecting the future. Also, these 5 companies just have a significant weight right now in the index. So that's why you have to be careful about drawing broad conclusions about companies just looking at the index. But companies have recovered. Their health companies have been positive. Earnings are projected to be have positive growth. Revenues are expected to have positive growth overall for S&P 500 companies in 2021. So I'm not saying that prices are going to be down across the board, but I do think that the rewards are going to be going toward companies that are able to adapt to the new business climate and who are going to be embracing some of these technological innovations.
Thank you. Anyone want to add to that? Great. I have a couple of COVID related questions. I'm going to see if I can pose these sort of together. The first one has a little bit of context. This individual says that I feel like we've been presented with a binary choice during this pandemic: support the economy, let people get sick, or kill the economy and let people be safe. It makes this perverse situation where we're encouraged to go out one day, then healthcare workers are exhausted to keep us alive. Is this really a binary choice, is the question. Is there any way we could keep people safe and healthcare workers sane without ending up kind of out in the street and falling apart? Do you think this is a binary choice? Is it one or the other, economy or safety? Any thoughts on this?
If I could jump in and just say, and I'll maybe start us out and just say that I absolutely don't think it's a binary choice. In fact, it's the opposite, right? I think we need to be sure to get the virus under control if we want to grow the economy. And we're really not going to recover the economy until we get some control. Now, I think there are some middle grounds, right? We started out in March and April, and our approach to it was complete shutdown. Right. And what we've learned kind of over time is that it seems like we can take some steps, whether it's, masking, certain levels of social distancing, building ways in that the economy can continue to perform and start to recover. And, we're seeing cases go up, but I'm not sure that that's directly related to that economic activity. So I think there's a middle ground there where we need to be smart with, okay, we understand that we need to have the economy going, but health and safety are first and foremost, both from a human perspective, of we just want to have a healthy population, healthy society, but also from an economic perspective, we need to get the virus under control and limit the spread.
Any others want to add to that?
I think that's very well said.
Another COVID question, really more specifically, is today with COVID cases rising rapidly right now, especially in Indiana. Do you think manufacturers are going to have to shut down periodically to limit the spread?
It's very possible. And, you know, I know that if there was an Indy Chamber member, we would advise any of our manufacturing members to have a plan ready to go if it came to that. And that's why I can't emphasize enough what Professor Anderson just said. And to the question, we've got to get outside the politicization of everything from masks to health and safety policies has been really, really unfortunate because and you know, government public health officials and also essential workers in medicine have been easy targets, because just because your state or your city says it's okay to open doesn't mean that that customers are going to be comfortable going into your space. You know, people are smart, they see the number of cases, and so getting control of the virus and making sure that the number of cases is moving in the right direction has got to be fundamental. And I applaud also the questions in terms of getting us out of this either or proposition. It's not helping anybody.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. When you actually, there's data on mobility and what people are doing, and you can see that it hasn't recovered, and that is not due to necessarily top-down restrictions. That's due to comfort level, people feeling comfortable enough to go out, and so until that is recovered, and again coming back to what both Michael and Kyle said, we're going to see some curtailment of business and consumer activity.
Thank you.
Sorry.
That's okay. This next question is directed to Kyle, but again, if anyone wants to chime in, feel free. Kyle, why do we expect the unemployment rate to go down? And is it based on the assumption that coronavirus cases will also go down? Or does it include the fact that a number of people who are part of the unemployment statistics will stop looking for jobs?
Yeah, well, I certainly don't think I mean, that can certainly happen, that people leave the labor force, so the unemployment rate goes down because of that. But I hope that's not the case. I hope we're actually just seeing a lot of job creation. And part of the reason that forecast shows the unemployment rate going down is because I'm looking out across the 2021 year. So I certainly think by next summer and next fall, we'll have strong enough job creation and that the coronavirus cases will be going down. That doesn't necessarily mean that in December and January, we're better off than we are now. But I think, on a longer view over the course of 2021, I certainly expect us to be at positive job creation. Hopefully folks coming back into the labor force, those who have left it, and our unemployment rate coming down.
Any others?
I'll just say that nationally, I do think the people leaving the labor force is a concern. If you look at U.S. labor force participation, it's recovered from where it was in April, but it's still down 2 percentage points from where it was in February. And that's very significant. That means people have left the labor force, and that amounts to about 1.2 million right now, people who have been unemployed for longer than 27 weeks. So that is something that we're hoping will turn around, but it's a significant concern for growth going forward at a national level.
Absolutely. Thank you. Another question to any of you. How do you anticipate the potential executive orders from the incoming administration on current tax policies will affect reshoring, manufacturing, expansion plans, et cetera?
I mean, I think that's a really tough question from my perspective, because, I mean, one of the things that I think we saw in this campaign is that it wasn't very policy heavy, right? So we didn't get real detailed policy prescriptions from what the Biden administration is going to look like. He or they ran a campaign largely based on issues that weren't really focused on policy. So it's made this forecast really difficult for us to try to identify what those effects are. The biggest thing I'll be looking at are some of the trade policy, because I think that we are seeing a lot of our goods Europe is imposing a lot of tariffs on us now. You know, we heard a lot about the tariffs that the Trump administration put in. And these trade wars are just really damaging, especially here in Indiana, where we do a lot of manufacturing. A lot of that gets exported, or our agriculture. So I'm really hopeful that, you know, especially from a trade perspective, and that's one area that really does sort of bypass Congress in a lot of instances. So it is something that you can see, you know, maybe relatively quick movement, although we haven't heard a commitment to that from the administration.
But I do think that companies they're going to be taking the lessons from this pandemic experience into consideration when they're considering that, regardless of what policies are going to be coming. So reshoring is a definite consideration.
Sorry, Kathy, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm going to be really also interested from a higher education perspective, and so also many of our large employers here, like Eli Lilly, Cummins, Rolls-Royce, excuse me, they're looking at trying to get a lot of international potential employees and graduates. And the previous administration has basically been very negative, has diminished the ability for getting talent from around the world to work here in Indianapolis or to attend our school. So I will be looking also and seeing what will be happening as far as executive orders may be changing so that we can bring back the talent from around the world that help this city thrive. A lot of our major employers in this state are actually owned by companies outside of the United States, like Rolls-Royce, for instance, or Subaru in Lafayette. So I'll be interested in seeing what's happening with the immigration policy for letting individuals get green cards, and also the policy for letting people come into the United States. And this once again being the choice around the world where people want to get higher education.
Great feedback. We have two more questions. I'll try to get to both, but maybe one. If any are left on the table, I'll make sure these panelists can answer them, and I will email those to you. I'd like to try to reassure we get your questions answered. This one, what are your thoughts on the entrepreneurial environment in Indianapolis, particularly seed or angel investing for new ventures? Are they going to sit tight, see how things unfold, or are they still looking to aggressively invest in the right spaces? Any thoughts or insight?
I'll just say I don't have the empirical evidence, but just totally sector dependent, 100% dependent on what sector, you know, those ventures are in. Some, you know, clearly anything that's hospitality related, you know, has really pulled back. Some sectors of manufacturing and technology related to manufacturing doing quite well. Interesting. Our digital marketing firms have been doing pretty well. We've actually been seeing that companies, it's up and down, but a lot of companies are aggressively marketing themselves in new ways. But I'll defer to the other panelists.
No, I mean, I think I'm seeing similar things, and Michael, you're probably the best one. You probably got your pulse on this as much as anybody. But I'm seeing some angel investing still going on. There's still interest. The investors still have money on the sidelines and looking for a place. I mean, we're in an environment where stocks are inflated, interest rates are extremely low. I think that people are looking for opportunities to make investments. And so I think that the market's going to be pretty good for raising capital for firms. But I think Michael's points are very well taken. It's going to be industry dependent, and you know we're in a high risk environment right now.
Great.
And also looking forward, if the election holds, that in those sectors of opportunity, there will be a lot more. If the president-elect, vice president-elect, we are now potentially having a vice president who's a woman. I think many more female-owned businesses are going to get a hard look, and they should have gotten a hard look. But I think Michael touched on it, the issue of diversity, inclusion after the social justice area. If the sector is right, I think people will be now eyes wide open and looking for opportunities, especially for women-owned businesses. And I hope females out there who are interested will watch these sectors and say, now perhaps the ceiling has been cracked, especially in the area of technology and IT.
Great. Thanks so much to everyone for these questions. I'm responding if I need information. Like I said, we will try to respond to the ones we've left hanging, but I want to honor everyone's time. We said we'd end at 1. So Phil, any final thoughts from you?
You know, Jen, we talk in the Kelley family of that. Our students, our alums, our faculty, our staff, members of our community have the talent to succeed, the humility to grow, and the tenacity to persevere. Never have these values been so relevant in terms of surviving what's going to be a really tough first and second quarter, but also seeing through to the bounce back and the prosperity that this region is going to return to. So with that, we go forward with a tough year, but we're going to get through this all together.
Absolutely. Well, I want to say a huge thank you to all of these panelists. A thank you to those of you that are still hanging on here at the end, right after 1. I will be emailing someone, myself likely, will be emailing you the report that you usually walk away with from our good friends in IBRC that will have a lot of this information. So that will still be provided. If you have any questions, feel free to email myself or the folks that have been emailing you with confirmation links. We're here to help. It'll be an interesting next few months, an interesting 2021. We hope you all remain safe and healthy. And we thank you for your support for the Kelley School of Business and particularly our Indianapolis region in the state of Indiana. So thank you to all. Have a wonderful afternoon and be well. And we'll see you soon. Thank you.